What is up, guys? I hope you've had a good week. I have to say that this has been a very, very odd week, just energetically, lots of odd things just going on. Something crazy's just happened. So I just filmed that video, a whole 45 minutes of raw footage, and at the end of it, I realized that I had lipstick on my tooth for the whole video. I hope it doesn't distract you too much, but enjoy. But needless to say, it has been a good week in the gym. And the previous video that I did, I spoke about how I'm going to be adapting my training, because since my blood test confirmed that I have got an issue with my thyroid, and it is autoimmune, that it does mean that I have to sort of adjust things ever so slightly. And while thyroid issues aren't the end of the world, it doesn't mean that I don't want to support my body and, you know, work with it essentially to make sure that I'm not sort of like exacerbating the effects of the hypothyroidism anymore. So weight training is bae. Weight training is not going anywhere. So it's just a case of making sure that what I'm doing, making small tweaks and making sure that I'm actually supporting myself while continuing to do what I love, which is lifting weights. So I've got a slightly different format today. I haven't been using lights recently, so you might notice that the lights just go in and out and everywhere. Just try and ignore that. We're going to have much more interesting things to focus on. So basically, I'll just quickly recap about thyroid issues and how they've affected my weightlifting journey, which will give you a bit of a basis as to why we need to do these little things, but obviously I'll explain it as we go along the video. So with hypothyroid, there is a propensity to have higher cortisol. There's also a tendency to be estrogen dominant, and there's usually going to be some inflammation present in the body as well. So while that's not everything, those are the things that kind of mostly affect my training. The overall goal of my training programs are now to manage cortisol, making sure that we're not pushing too hard and driving that cortisol up even more. Also giving ourselves enough time to rest, let the body bring its cortisol levels back down. With the estrogen dominant side of things, it's a little bit more than what I can go into in this video, but that would be something that I would like kind of focus on over the entirety of the month, not just like in any one training session. So essentially what I would be doing is working with my hormones again, really sort of like doing my higher intensity workouts in the first half of the cycle, and then tapering them off in the last half of the cycle where estrogen levels are naturally higher. But obviously with somebody with hypothyroid, where it's going to be even higher than that, we're not going to be pushing hard in that time. And instead we'll be doing like a lot more sort of like restorative sort of exercise. I'm only going to be going over the actual weightlifting side of things today and what a typical session is going to look like for me now. But again, you know, if you want to sort of like focus on the estrogen dominant component of thyroid, we're going to be looking at how we're going to be training across the whole month rather than just the one session. And then thirdly, we've got inflammation. So when we train, we break down muscle, we're actually chasing inflammation during that training session. We want that acute inflammation. That is good. But what we don't want is for the inflammation to be up, up, up. So say if we're training Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, if we're doing some sort of training every day, we're keeping those inflammation levels up. And don't forget, we've already got a higher baseline of inflammation in the body when you're dealing with hypothyroid. For that reason, I'll be training with less frequency. So before I was training up to 5 times a week, and now I'm going to be training 3 times a week, taking 2 rest days in between each session. What giving myself those 2 rest days in between is going to do is going to help me to recover so I can actually get more out of my sessions. When I'm in those sessions, I want to be pushing, you know, a good amount of intensity. I want that acute inflammation, but then I just want to give myself enough time for that inflammation to be coming back down and recovering fully in between. And then overall, to wrap up all those 3 factors, those are all going to be impacting the nervous system. So what I want to be doing with my new training program is making sure that I'm hitting all the muscle groups that I want to, while minimizing neurological stress. That in itself is going to make it a lot easier for me to recover in between my sessions. And it's going to just be a lot less taxing on my nervous system overall. And if I think about it as a feedback loop, as I reduce the stress on my nervous system, it's going to reduce the impact on those 3 components that we've just spoken about. as I manage those three components, it's going to put less stress on my nervous system. So overall, over time, everything is just going to be starting to calm down, which is going to enable me to keep training, keep moving. When I actually filmed this session, I didn't take my tripod with me. It's a very sort of like amateur setup that I've got going on in this session. But what we will be talking about is like load selection, exercise selection, rep range, that sort of thing. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, typically all my sessions would start with the big three: squat, bench or deadlift. Powerlifting is parked at the moment, so I'm not going to be like stressing myself out trying to, you know, keep up with those big three lifts, because they are quite neurologically taxing. They use multiple muscles at the same time. We're moving much bigger loads, and they take longer to recover from. So I'm taking those out completely, but I still want to focus on knee dominant leg training during this session. So what I've done instead is I've chosen the pendulum squat. As you can see, I'm coming all the way down. My hamstring's getting onto the back of my calf, which you typically don't get when you're doing like a normal back squat. So we're really getting the maximum range out of this, and much less load. So in terms of a quad exercise, this is actually going to be more effective at, you know, building strength and building muscle than a squat would be anyway. And I get all those benefits without putting that extra strain on my nervous system. So when you think about the pendulum squat in comparison to the back squat, there were much fewer muscles being used here. So obviously I just get to concentrate on building my quads. I get that full extension, that full stretch of the quad that I typically wouldn't get with a back squat. And I'm managing to do all of this with a lot less load. So for the purpose of the exercise, which is to get hypertrophy and strength on my quads, I'm getting better payoff with less weight, and that's always good. During this session, I only went up to 35. That's just what felt like an RPE 8 for me this week. And so I just started off at 30. I just worked at 35 and I went for 10 reps. So obviously it's not all about load, volume as a factor as well. So typically like 4x10, 4x12, 5x10, they're kind of like definitely much more high volume bodybuilder style training routines. So if I'm thinking about my pendulum squat being the replacement for my back squat, there is capacity that's already built there. So I did feel like I could go for 4 sets of 10 rather than 3 sets of 10. So I just put that extra set in, get a little bit more volume, because I have got that baseline capacity that I've obviously built from powerlifting. So maybe for like a client, I wouldn't necessarily put 4 sets of 10 in there because we're trying to keep the volume nice and low. But of course, that's where training history, training experience all comes into it as well. Okay, so after that, I've gone straight in with leg extensions. The primary focus of this actual workout is push, quads, very sort of like quad dominant, knee dominant stuff we're doing today. So the leg extension has been literally non-existent in my training for the past couple of years. All the time I was doing powerlifting, I would not use a leg extension because it was just such an isolated movement that just didn't transfer into my powerlifting whatsoever. So I wouldn't use it, but the amount of extra volume that I'm getting from this with minimal fatigue, especially putting it straight after those pendulum squats, it's a perfect combination. By using the leg extension straight after the pendulum squats, I'm basically just burning out my quads, getting that extra volume, but with very little extra neurological fatigue, even though it doesn't feel like that because they fucking burn. But yeah, once these are completed, that's the quad focused part of the workout completed. So yeah, we've gone in with the pendulum squats, we've done, you know, an extra set for that extra volume. We've gone straight into the leg extensions to get that extra volume without sort of like driving fatigue even further. So as you can imagine, by this point, my quads are pretty fried, but we're still only like 15 minutes into the workout, 15-20 minutes into the workout, and I've got all the volume that I need for my quads already done, but I'm still fresh enough to go on and do other things as well. Is that we have to use exercise selection during this period to be really effective, pretty tough, so lots of the same muscle group like close together, keeping that intensity, not spreading it out throughout the workout. So I'm not doing squats and then hamstrings and then walking lunges and then RDLs and then leg extension. No, we're putting all that work right next to each other. So following that, I've moved on to hip thrusts because, you know, we're here for the booty as well. So I've moved on to hip thrusts. So the way that I do my hip thrusts, I don't feel it in my quads. I know that this is something that, you know, a lot of people do feel in the quads. Generally, that kind of means that your feet are just not positioned quite right. But yeah, it took me a long time to figure out how to do a hip thrust and not feel it anywhere other than in my glutes. Sometimes I can feel it in my lower back, but generally that's when you're sort of like going quite heavy. So for this reason, I actually prefer to keep my hip thrust on the lighter side. You usually find me doing hip thrust with like 12 reps, 15 reps, rather than like those sort of 6-8 reps. When I see people doing that, I'm just like, that can't be all glute. You're just not going to get that nice juicy pump from that. I've never done it anyway. So yeah, when it comes to hip thrust, I prefer to keep it a little bit on the lighter side and go for more reps. That way I can feel it more in my glutes and I get less involvement from the surrounding muscles. So as you can see, we've got this hip thrust thing at my gym. I don't actually like it that much. I prefer the good old bench and barbell setup personally. That works for me a little bit better, but here we are. So something that I didn't mention at the beginning of the video was that the workout session has to fit within an hour. You know, we're working quite intensely, but we don't want to drive that cortisol up too much. Once we're working out past like 45 minutes to an hour, especially as women, we're starting to go into that sort of like danger zone with the cortisol if we're working at the right intensity. So yes, time is definitely a factor now. I did think it would be quicker to set this up rather than the bench and barbell, but personally I do prefer the bench and barbell setup. So with the hip thrust, because the reps are so high, I was able to go for fewer sets with this one. Also, we're getting to that midpoint of the workout now. So really when I'm sort of like doing those exercises with like 4 or 5 sets, I will generally do those at the beginning of the workout. We're getting to the middle of the workout now, so yeah, backing it down, 3 sets, 12 to 15. So next I've moved on to hip extension. So this is actually a really basic piece of equipment and it is probably my favorite for working hamstrings and glutes. Now, as I say, muscles that fire together, wire together, you generally get like a better aesthetic when you work out the muscles like next to each other together. So rather than sort of like always focusing on glute isolation or hamstring isolation, you might want to do exercises that kind of combine the both so they just work together better. So this is why I really love the hip extension. As you can see here, I'm using more of a glute dominant positioning. So I'm keeping my chin down and I'm not coming all the way up, so I'm not letting my back arch. So by doing this, I'm really keeping the focus on my glutes and my hamstrings, and the upper body's not getting involved at all. But using the hip extension overall, you can actually use this piece of equipment to target the whole back side. So I find that the hip extension is really good for like training that mind-muscle connection for the posterior chain. So it's an excellent one for anyone to do for like posture, for your walking, for your gait, for runners. But while we're focusing on hypertrophy, I'm trying to get as much focus on my glutes and my hamstrings as possible. When I've gone for a moderate weight that I can do like 10 reps with, I actually find it quite difficult to hold a heavier weight. Now, even though I know that typically hamstrings prefer to be trained like under 10 reps, but for me, I just don't really feel like I'm working at that rep range because I can't hold a weight that's heavy enough to fatigue me at the 8 rep mark. So I always tend to go for about 10 reps, maximum 12 if I'm doing hamstrings. And then I actually can't believe, like talking through the workout, it seems to go so quickly, but I can't believe we're at the end of the workout already. So this is quite new for me again, like obviously come from a powerlifting background. Workouts are an hour and a half, like don't be going to the gym with an hour, that's just not going to work. Amazingly, this workout managed to get done within an hour, so that was really good. So here we are at the end of it. We're just doing some hip adductor stuff here. More than anything else, it's just for balance. Since I've started training my adductors and focusing on them, I really do like the shape that it's given to my legs. Now, obviously you can't spot reduce weight loss, but I do feel like since I've been working my adductors, the shape of my legs is more aesthetic now. Obviously with the current climate how it is, there is like a tendency for girls to always want to be training those outer glutes, pushing everything out, sort of like really trying to get your glutes engaged. But if you think the amount of work that we're doing for that, we kind of need to do the opposite to just make sure that we're staying in balance, keeping our pelvis stable, keeping our hips healthy, because at the end of the day, you know, that's important as well as booty gains. So so yeah, since I started doing adductors, I really love the way that these feel. And as a little tip, if you really wait until once your legs are at full extension, don't just relax and then push back in. You got to control it, so all the way out, keep it controlled, and without sort of like losing that tension, bring them back in. Now you will really feel how your glutes, your lower back, you know, sort of that concentration, you will really feel how that all works together and keeps your pelvis nice and stable. Because at the end of the day, you know, if we're doing anything too much, we're going to create an imbalance. So by adding in these sorts of exercises, if you're doing lots of glute work, you want to be adding in these sorts of exercises as well, to make sure that we're not getting injured and we're not getting any postural imbalances, because thank you. So with these ones, I've gone nice and heavy. Funnily enough, like when I used to do these years ago, I could never go anywhere near as heavy, but I've got some pretty good adductors now from like squatting, sumo deadlifting, stuff like that. So I was able to go quite heavy with these. I went for 12 reps and, you know, as I just mentioned, really sort of like focus on that mind muscle connection. And yeah, so that is the end of the workout. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for bearing with me in that new sort of like setup. I'm sure when I edit it, I'm going to think, I should have done that differently. But we're trying new things. I actually really enjoyed walking through the workout in this way. So yeah, I'll probably do this again in the future. But so anyway, the takeaway from this particular workout was lots of focus on my quads, which is the muscle group that I want to work on at the moment. Be conservative with the amount of sets and reps that we're doing, and also making sure that the workout is not running over more than an hour. And also in terms of exercise selection, we're going for ones that offer lots of benefits. So in this case, lots of work on the quads while not putting too much strain on the nervous system. So as you can see, we managed to achieve all of that in this workout. My other two workouts of the week are actually full body, so they incorporate both legs and upper body as well. If you keep an eye on my shorts or on my Instagram, you'll probably see a couple of my workouts over there. But that is it for today. Thank you for checking out the video, and I will see you in the next one.